consequences of imposter syndrome in students, and how background basically shapes your self-perception and eventually your coping strategies. So you might be asking, why in the world did I choose this topic, specifically imposter syndrome? Well, it all started when I joined AP seminar during my junior year, and basically that was my first AP class I had ever taken. And there are a lot of people like this, as you can see in the background, but let's pretend that they're AP students. Anyway, we have all the AP students there, and they're all talking. And I just remember feeling so alone, because everyone else already had like all their, cliques and everything, and everyone else also kept talking about like, AP classes, and I was just like so alone. I was just like what? Like one of the words is like AP Psych, like one of the words is like AP Physics, and everyone's like talking about like theorems and everything like that, and I'm just like, well, I don't get any of that, and I just felt like really alone. And then that's when like all the thoughts kept coming into my head, like, like for instance, if we have CP, then we have honors, then we have AP students, and I feel like, oh my gosh, like AP students are like at the top of the hierarchy, and all I've ever taken is CP and honors. So whenever I saw someone who was like an AP student, I would literally just look at him like whoa, like you're so cool, like I really want to be like you. So when I eventually had that opportunity to join AP seminar, I was like, oh my gosh, like yay, now I'm in the like little clique and everything. But I still felt alone, and not only just alone, but I just felt like I didn't contribute as much as other AP students, especially because like I know someone who like already took like 5 APs, some took like 3 APs before entering junior year, and this was my first and only AP that I took, so it was very like just lonely. So you might be asking, what in the world is imposter syndrome? Well, who here has ever felt like they weren't enough, like in a class, or like they always compared themselves to someone else? Thank you. Even teachers feel that way as well. And basically, imposter syndrome by the American Psychological Association means it's basically an ongoing fear that you might be found out as a fraud, and that you're going to be unmatched as being incompetent or unable to replicate past successes. And for me, I personally feel that way, because sometimes I might get like a 99%, and then because I'm already like built into this background, this cultural background, where in my culture you literally have to be like at the top of your class. So if I get 99 and I go home, my parents are like, well, that's great, but you could always do better. And so that always doing better just kept building more and more pressure for me. So my research question eventually became, do students from certain cultural backgrounds report more intense feelings of IS, or imposter syndrome, or discuss unique coping strategies tied to their culture? My hypothesis was that specifically students from Asian and Indian backgrounds will definitely report more intense feelings, because you don't exactly need a credible source to tell you that students from Asian and Indian backgrounds are like at the top of their class, and that's a compliment, by the way. But it's definitely like that was definitely my hypothesis. As for unique coping strategies, I definitely felt like every culture has their own thing, like yoga, meditation, maybe even going to your religion, like Jesus, etc. So I wasn't really worried about that, which is my hypothesis for that was just, it can be anything, because everyone is different and we all have to learn either way. So my original plan was actually to use an online survey questionnaire, and in that questionnaire, some of the questions would be, do you compare yourself to others and find yourself feeling inadequate? The other questions would be, do you find it difficult to accept compliments, feeling like you don't deserve praise? The same thing would also happen in the interview, except this would be a one-on-one. My original plan for this was using a mixture of these methodologies, like a survey questionnaire and an interview one-on-one, because it will directly connect you with the person, and you're not just like going online like, can I find something here? No, you're actually talking to the person. So for my methodology, I chose content analysis. And the reason why I chose content analysis, it's varying, but number one reason why I chose content analysis was because it had easier data extraction, which means I could find data really easy, especially with their advanced search tools. So for instance, let's say you go on Reddit or vice versa, you immediately already have a lot of options because of course it's also online. So you already have a lot of options for like your search. You can just go into the regular search bar, type in da da da, and then you go into the next one, and then you can just like filter it to your specific source that you're looking for. The other reason why I chose this was because I would get a lot of biased information from here, which is very, very good for this topic because it's all about cultural perspectives, and it also contributed to my qualitative and quantitative data. So my data extraction plan was number one. I was going to, these are all my four subcategories within my data plan. First is cultural influences, the second is imposter syndrome, the third is coping strategies and self-perception. So as you can see here, we have cultural influences, imposter syndrome, coping strategies, and self-perception. So in each of the rows, what I would do is I would go on the source, which I'll get into later, but I would go into each of the source, whatever source I found, I would line them up into one of these subcategories. For instance, let's say I find something on TikTok, for instance. I would put the exact quote of what I found, and then I would link it. That way I could go back to see if I could find more quotes. And whatever additional comments I found, I also put them in the same line as the same thing, the same column as like the subcategories. So for instance, we have this one, so like from TikTok, and then it goes here and then it goes here. So everything in black is just additional comments that I found, and everything in blue or the length version is basically my starting point. So first of all, we have my OG source, which is Reddit. I know that it's not really credible, especially for an AP research course, but I felt like this would give me more opportunities to get more biased sources. It was also easier to find specific groups through subreddits. What I mean by that is if you go into the search bar, you can type in high school, for instance, and in that group, you can also type R imposter syndrome or R fraud, and you'll be able to find like specific comments, quotes, videos based on what you just typed in. The next one is TED Talks, which is more credible, and everyone knows TED Talks because it's really popular. However, there were limited perspectives on IS because TED Talks is more leaned towards like scientific research and more data on that. So it was really hard to find speakers who would talk about like their own personal experiences on like what they grew up through, like etc. vice versa. It was also the source where I had the least sources gathered, unfortunately. Last but not least is TikTok, where this is where I found my most sources, and it had more cultural reviews because everyone uses TikTok nowadays. Like I'm pretty sure everyone uses TikTok here, right? Well, the teenagers do. But we also have more coping strategies than I found from any other source. And that's because since it's such a wide variety of people, you can find almost like anything. For my findings, the first thing I found, I cut this into like the subcategories again. So the first thing I found for imposter syndrome was from TikTok. And this person basically talks about how their friend's average is around a 95, which they think is pretty good. But whenever that person talks about like their friend's grade, she always tells her sister, like, oh, my sister is averaging a 99%. Do you not all think that getting a 95 on a test is pretty good enough? Mm-hmm. And a 99 too, right? So why in the world are they doubting themselves? The next one is from TED Talks. I actually got one from someone named Lalani Fazal. She's a Pacifica and youth advocate, and she's also a third-gen New Zealand-born Samoanian. And we can see here about how she talks about herself. Since she was born in New Zealand but isn't really considered a Samoanian, she talks about having to fill these different standards, these different boxes that she had to tick, standards to meet, people to please, etc. And I never really considered how, if you were born, let's say for instance your ethnicity is African, but you were born here, you're already being judged because of what you do, how you look, how you act, based on not even being born in Africa, but you were born in the US. You're already being judged. Next is Reddit for cultural influences. This person here is South Asian, and they basically talk about how they feel pressured to be one of like the best students that they can be. And one thing I want to point out here is how they say it's mostly familial, family. It just concerns the family. Anyway, their parents have been to and gone to the top 5 colleges in the country. So already there's a lot of pressure on them, and vice versa. So here are other quotes just basically talking about how and what they feel when dealing with imposter syndrome, specifically students, the TED Talk speaker that I was talking about. One thing I want to point out here is that specifically what I noticed from my data collection was that immigrants, first-gen students, Asians, African Americans, pretty much anyone can experience imposter syndrome, especially as a student, because that's a lot of work. We go through kindergarten, then we go to elementary, then we go to middle school, then high school, then we have college, which is a whole different thing. So anyone can experience imposter syndrome. I used to think that, maybe it's just, me that experiences it, but no, from my data collection, everyone experiences imposter syndrome. So some key points here, according to Wang from Cornell University. Basically, in Western cultures, failure is viewed as a threat. In many East Asian cultures, failure is idolized as an opportunity to better oneself. So if you fail, that's okay. You can still learn from your mistakes. European Americans remember more personal successes than failures, which is very, very good. But in many Western cultures, like for instance, me, where I come from, if you fail in something, like what are you doing here? Like, it's like you already like completely messed up your future and vice versa. Here we have some coping strategies that I found on TikTok, Reddit, and just TikTok and Reddit. What I want to point out here is that you can see different like coping strategies, unique coping strategies tied to their culture. For instance, this person uses religious backgrounds, so they use Christianity. Jesus motivates me. This person uses like their own like self-worth. Like, what do they feel? Like, when you take the time for yourself, what others do not matter anymore. Basically, everyone has their own way of dealing with imposter syndrome. Next, we have limitations. The one limitation that I struggled with was not finding enough cultural perspective on IS. The next one was less credible sources, because again, I was using Reddit, TikTok. TED Talk was also okay, but I wasn't really using much credible sources. The data pool was also smaller. In total, I got around 40 sources, but I still would have liked to get more than that. And it was also rare finding high school students, especially when I was gathering my data. I found out that it was mostly just talking about medical students, college students, grad students, but I didn't really get anything from high school students. For my implications, there is going to be a risk of mental issues. If another researcher were to like ask this or like go more into this, there would be a risk of mental health issues. Like the participant may develop like depression, anxiety, like self-doubt, self-worth. because of all the questions that one might ask. There might also be a lack of honesty because again, it's mostly family related. So there might be a lack of honesty because no one wants to answer questions about themselves that eventually could reach their parents. There's also a probability of offense towards students. So again, why would I want to answer a question that might offend me and my family? Here's my works cited, and thank you.
I want to ask you this question, but it's going to be weird. Think back to your initial search. What source did you find that was deemed credible, but the information was not reliable to you? And I know that you went back and forth between credible and non-credible. Explain why you chose not to use it. You chose to use sources that might not be deemed credible. How did you decide what was credible for you in your research, and were there things that were not credible that you saw, that you would not use?
I would definitely say what set apart like the credible versus non-credible was like how biased it was. Also, if it was like talking about just like plainly like how to deal with, for instance, like a coping strategy, but not actually like how to deal with imposter syndrome, then I wouldn't use it because it wasn't related to like my topic at all. Also, like some sources, they talked about like their life and everything, but they weren't talking about like student wise. So if there was anything like not students, like that already like set a whole barrier for my sources.
Thank you.
What might be the real-world implications or consequences to your local school?
Again, I would just say the risks of mental health issues, because with imposter syndrome, it's really a battle of your mental state. So for instance, if you ask someone who's already like going through anxiety or depression and you ask them, how do you feel, like in class with other people? Like, do you feel like happy? Do you feel any lesser than? That's already like causing a whole risk of like making it way worse. So.
Okay. Which part of the research process did you find the easiest? Was this something you were anticipating it would be easy?
Oh, I would definitely say the methodology, like choosing my methodology. I realized like in class when we did like research updates and everything, people would talk about like methodologies, and I was like, well, which one would be best for me? And so not even just best for me, but like the research in general. And then I chose content analysis because again, advanced search tools, it made it way easier to find particular sources. Yeah.
Thank you.